Good morning to all. I am Sonakshi Majumdar. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I am going to teach you class 6th SST History chapter 11 New Empires and Kingdoms. So take out your book and be ready. Prashasti and what they tell us. Prashasti means prasansha. Okay, किसी की तारीफ करना. Arvind was given the role to act as Samudragupta, who was a famous ruler of the Gupta dynasty. He have a lot of information about Samudragupta through a long inscription, actually a poem in Sanskrit and which was composed by his court poet Harshvardhan nearly 1700 years ago. This was inscribed on the Ashokan pillar at Allahabad. This inscription is of a special kind known as a Prashasti. This is a Sanskrit word which means in praise of. While Prashastis were composed for some of the rulers, such as Gautamiputra, Sri Satyakarni, they become far more important from the time of the Guptas. Samudragupta's Prashasti. Now we will see what Samudragupta's Prashasti tell us. The king is praised by the poet in glowing terms as a warrior, as a king who won victories in battle, who was learned and the best of poets. He is also described as equal to the gods. The Prashasti was composed in very long sentences. If you look at map 7 given on page 88, you will find the area which is shaded in green. You will also notice a series of red dots along the east coast, and you will find areas marked in purple and blue as well. This map is drawn on the basis of the information provided in the Prashasti. 4 different kinds of rulers have been described by Harshvardhan. He tells us about Samudragupta's policies towards them. The rulers of Aryavarta, the area which is shaded in green on the map, there are 9 rulers in this area. They were uprooted and their kingdoms were made a part of Samudragupta's empire. Second point is the rulers of Dakshinapath. There were 12 rulers in this area. Capitals of some such rulers are marked with red dots on the map. These rulers surrendered to Samudragupta after being defeated, and he then allowed them to rule again. The inner circle of neighboring states that included Assam, coastal Bengal, Nepal, and a number of Ghan Sanghas in the northwest. These are marked in purple on the map. They brought tribute, followed his orders, and attended his court. Fourth point is the rulers of the outlying areas which are marked in blue on the map. They were perhaps the descendants of the Kushanas and Shakas, and the ruler of Sri Lanka who submitted to him and offered daughters in marriage. Genealogies. In most Prashasti, the ancestors of the ruler are also mentioned. This one mentions Samudragupta's great grandfather, grandfather, father, and mother. Kumar Devi was his mother. She belonged to the Licchavi Gana. His father, Chandragupta, was the first ruler of the Gupta dynasty. He adopted the grand title of Maharaj Adhiraj and a title that Samudragupta also used. His great grandfather and grandfather are mentioned simply as Maharajas. It seems as if the family gradually rose to importance. Samudragupta in turn figures in the genealogist means list of ancestors of later rulers of the dynasty, such as his son Chandragupta II. A lot of information about him is available from inscriptions and coins. He led an expedition to western India, where he conquered the last of the Shakas. According to later belief, his court was full of learned people. Kalidas, the great poet, and Aryabhat, the astronomer, Harshvardhan and the Harshcharita. While we can get information about the Gupta rulers from their inscriptions and coins, we can find out about some kings from biographies. Harshvardhana, who ruled nearly 1400 years ago, was one such ruler. Banna Bhatt, who was his court poet, wrote his biography, the Harshcharita. It was written in Sanskrit. This gives us the genealogy of Harsha and ends with his becoming king. Zhang, about whom you have read in chapter 10, also spent a lot of time at Harsh's court and left a detailed account of what he saw and observed. Harsh was not the eldest son of his father, but he became king of Thanesar after the death of his father and elder brother. His brother in law was the ruler of Kannauj. He was killed by the ruler of Bengal. Harsh took under his control the kingdom of Kannauj. He then led an army against the ruler of Bengal. He got success in the east and conquered both Magad and Bengal. However, he was not as successful elsewhere. He tried to cross the Narmada to march into the Deccan, but he was stopped by the Chalukya ruler known as Pulakasin II. The Pallavas, Chalukyas, and Pulakasin Prashasti. During this period, the Pallavas and the Chalukyas were the most important ruling dynasties in South India. The kingdom of the Pallavas spread from the region around their capital Kanchipuram to the Kaveri Delta. The kingdom of the Chalukyas was centered around the Raichur Doab between the rivers Krishna and Tungabhadra. Aihole was the capital of Chalukyas. This was an important trading center. It emerged as a religious center with a number of temples. The Pallavas and Chalukyas frequently raided one another's land and specially attacked the capital cities, which were prosperous towns. Pulakasin II was the best known Chalukya ruler. He get the information about him from a Prashasti which was composed by his court poet Ravi Kirti. This tells us about his ancestors, who are traced back through four generations from father to son. Pulakasin evidently got the kingdom from his uncle. According to his court poet Ravi Kirti, he led expedition along both the west and the east coasts. Besides, he checked the advance of Harsh. There is an interesting play of words in the poem. Harsh means happiness. The poet says that after this defeat, Harsh was no longer Harsh. The Pallava king was also attacked by Pulakasin. The Pallava king took shelter behind the walls of Kanchipuram. But the victory of Chalukya was short lived. Ultimately, both the Pallavas and the Chalukya were overcome by new rulers belonging to the Rashtrakuta and Chola dynasties, about which you will study in class 7th. How were these kingdoms administrated? In these kingdoms, two land revenue remained important for these rulers. The village remained the basic unit of administration. Some new developments took place. A number of steps were adopted by the kings to win the support of men who were powerful either economically or socially or because of their political and military strength. For example, some important administrative posts were made hereditary. This means that sons succeeded fathers to this post. For example, the poet Harshena was a Mahadandanayak or chief judicial officer like his father. Sometimes many offices were held by a single person. For example, besides being a Mahadandanayak, Harshena was a Kumar Amatya, which meant an important minister, and a Sandhi Vigrahika, which meant a minister of war and peace. Besides, important men probably had a say in local administration. This included the Nagashrestha or chief banker or merchant of the city, the merchant caravans, the Prathama Kulika or the chief craftsman, and the head of the caste or scribes. Though these policies were reasonably effective, sooner or later some of these powerful men grew strong enough to establish independent kingdoms. A new kind of army. Some of the kings of these kingdoms maintained a well organized army. They had elephants, chariots, and foot soldiers. Besides, there were military leaders who provided the king with troops whenever he required them. Regular salaries were not paid to them. Instead, some of them were given grants of land. They collected revenue from the land. They used such revenue to maintain soldiers and horses and provide equipments for warfare. These men were known as Samantas. Samantas always tried to become independent ruler, and whenever the ruler was weak, Samantas tried to become independent. Assemblies in the southern kingdoms. A number of local assemblies has been mentioned in the inscription of the Pallavas. This included the Sabha, which was an assembly of Brahmin owners. There were subcommittees through which this assembly functioned. The subcommittees looked after irrigation, agricultural operations, making roads, local temples, etc. The village assembly was also known as Ur. This was found in areas where the landowners were not Brahmins. The Nagaram was an organization of merchants. These assemblies were probably controlled by rich and powerful landowners and merchants. Several of these local assemblies continued to function for centuries. Ordinary people in the kingdoms. We can have an occasional glimpse of the lives of ordinary people from plays and other accounts. Let us look at some of this. Kalidas is famous for his plays depicting life in the king's court. One of the interesting features about this plays is that the king and most Brahmins were depicted as speaking Sanskrit, while women and men other than the king and Brahmins use Prakrit. Abhijan Sakuntalam is the most famous play. This is the story of the love between a king named Dushyant and a young woman named Shakuntala. The plight of a poor fisherman has been interestingly described in this play. The plight of those who were treated as untouchables by the high and mighty was noticed by the Chinese pilgrim Faxian. They were expected to live on the outskirts of the city. He writes, if such a man enters a town or a marketplace, he strikes a piece of wood in order to keep himself separate. People hearing this sound know what it means and avoid touching him or brushing against him. Bana Bhatt provides us with a vivid picture of the king's army on the move. So, students, that's all for today. I will send you the PDF and you have to write the question answers, okay, in your history notebook in good handwriting. Your homework is to read the chapter. Do book reading of this chapter. Next chapter I will explain in my next video. Till then, bye. Take care. Thank you.